Alrighty, we're running out of time this semester, and I want to be able to cover all of the classes so that if you go on to zoology in college, you still have a basic understanding of some of these. So for you seniors, we're going to have to kind of whip through some of this material. So I've made a couple of videos just so that you can cover this material at home, just in case we don't get through it in class. So we're talking about class Aves, and that is all of the birds. Characteristics of birds in general: they have feathers and wings. They lay eggs, more particularly amniotic eggs. Remember, that's an adaptation for life on land. They have 2 legs, and since they have 2 legs and 2 wings, they're tetrapods. And they have ear holes instead of ears. And maybe you noticed when you were holding some of the chicks, they have those little ear holes. And they're warm-blooded. And the other term for that is endothermic. So they produce heat from within. Now when we're looking at birds, there are lots of characteristics that we can use to identify the type of bird it is and some of what it deals with in its own habitat. So if we look at the bird on the top, look at the bill and try and imagine what kind of food this sort of bird eats. And if you guessed that it eats insects, you were correct. And that pointy little bill helps it to capture some of the insects and to pick them out of the bark of trees and some small spaces. Now look at the bird just below it, one with the crest. What kind of food would you imagine it eats? And if you guess seeds, you're correct because it uses that big thick bill for cracking seeds. And then we have the bird on the bottom, and that one is an omnivore and eats a little more of insects and seeds, and so it's got kind of an in-between sort of bill. Bird watching is a very popular hobby here in the U.S. and in other parts of the world, and people start to memorize different characteristics. So you might want to look at whether there's a line above the eye and what the shape of the wings are. Are there wing bars? And that would be a little white stripe across that. Is it a forked tail? Is it a solid tail? And you look for different characteristics, and that helps you narrow it down to an order within the class. Alright, I'm going to just show you some of my favorite Colorado birds. We've got the Steller's jay, gorgeous bird, bright blue feathers, and that black crest on top. This is one of the jays, and it belongs in the corvid family, so along with the ravens and crows and magpies, and all of these are very intelligent birds, slightly obnoxious because they are so intelligent. They can get into a little more trouble, but that makes them really cool. And a Steller's jay has many different vocalizations, so you may see them around your property and hear lots of different calls coming out of them. Got the northern flicker, and you're probably aware of this one in the springtime. It's got that beautiful salmon color underneath the wings, and if you look, it's got little red whiskers next to the beak. That's a male. The male has red whiskers. The female's going to look very similar, except she's going to have black there instead. But the flickers you probably notice in the spring because they start to drum for mates. So they'll get on the chimney and just go rat-a-tat-tat-tat, and it just vibrates the whole house. And that calls to the females, and normally in the wild before there were houses, they evolved drumming on hollow logs and dead trees, and it would make this nice vibration that would bring the females in. Now they can use the metal flashing on a chimney and really call in the women. And this is a female, and you can see the black on her cheek. Underneath her wings, if she spread them out, you'd see the salmon color. But one of the things I want you to notice is that tail that she has. She uses that for perching, so it's kind of like a little seat. So those golfers' seats, when they carry them around and then just kind of flip it up and sit down quickly. And that's the sort of thing she's got those feathers for. We've got the broad-tailed hummingbird, and it's got kind of a purplish red throat, the male does. In the next picture, you'll see why it's called a broadtail. This is a female, so she doesn't have the reddish purple. She's got some stripes, but you can see that big tail that she uses to kind of bank and to help her direct her way to a flower. And a golden eagle, they're just very impressive. You can see the talons on this bird, and they're brave and majestic, and they'll fly right into a storm so that they can ride the thermals up and be able to see prey better. And then the western bluebird, and it's got kind of a red chest and a deep indigo back. And the mountain bluebird. And the mountain bluebird is more of a turquoise color and a slightly larger bird. Very beautiful. So we have both of those in this area. Alright, we've already talked about chick development, and so I'm not going to go into that a whole lot. Probably one of the terms that I didn't use when we talked about the chicks was broody. And that means that the chicken is setting on the eggs. So she'll lay 6 or 7 eggs for a few days, and then she'll brood and sit on top of that for 21 days, shifting the eggs as she goes along, so she's turning those. And that's why when we incubated, we used the automatic turner, because the embryo can get stuck to the outside of the shell, or the inside of the shell, excuse me, if it's not turned. Alright, and we were able to look at the slides of the 24-hour chick and some of the embryos. Now when we broke open some of the eggs in the class, the ones that didn't develop, there was one that was about this stage. It was mostly eyeballs. And then we had one that was about this, day 19, where it still had a lot of the yolk. It's amazing, between day 19 and day 21 when they hatch, they absorb all the rest of the yolk into their body, and then they've got that for a couple of days storage. And alright, so let's talk about some feathers. Purpose of feathers. There are a number of different purposes. One is for flying, and on this particular eagle you can see the primary feathers are kind of finger-like, and those help with direction and lift. They also use feathers for temperature regulation. This little bird is all puffed up because it's cold out, and so it kind of makes a nice down coat over them. So when it's warmer, the feathers will be laying down more and be more sleek. They have water repellent properties. Ducks have a waxy substance that they put all over their feathers, and it helps the water shed off of the feathers and keeps them dry. And as I mentioned earlier, they can use the feathers for bracing. So that's a pileated woodpecker on the right side, and it's got the tail for bracing. And then on the left, that's a ptarmigan, and it's a bird with big feathery feet, and it braces kind of like snowshoes when it's walking around in the winter. The ptarmigan is actually pretty interesting. In the summertime, it's brown, and then it molts into that white plumage so that it blends into the snowy background.